Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Week 4 recap in the American Athletic Conference. Going into this week's action, I have a cumulative record of 35-3. So let's see how I fared this week and how the team did in this week's slate. UAB was on a bye week this week, and as they prepare for a conference showdown with Navy next week, week 5. And speaking of Navy, the midshipmen now move to 3-0 with a big conference win over Memphis, while the Tigers fall to 3-1. The final score was an amazing 56-44 in favor of the USNA. Memphis scored a touchdown on its first possession, and then their defense held Navy to a 3-and-out. Navy tied the score at 7, then again at 14 after falling behind, before picking up 2 touchdowns to go into halftime leading 28-17. They extended that lead to 35-17 before Memphis came roaring back to close to within 35-30 near the end of the third quarter. But then quarterback Blake Horvath broke free for a 60-yard run, followed up by a 2-yard scoring run by Alex Texa. And Navy built the lead back up to 42-30. The Tigers then went on a long 14-play drive. However, when they got to first and goal at the Navy 10, a fumble recovered by the offense, followed by 3 Seth Hennigan incomplete passes, turned the ball over on downs. Horvath then broke through on a 90-yard scoring run, giving Navy a 49-30 advantage. Memphis then scored touchdowns on 2 straight possessions to claw their way back to 49-44. Then with just a minute 22 left, Memphis got the ball back. Faced with a 2nd and 10 from the Navy 26, Rayon Lane III stepped in front of a Seth Hennigan pass and picked it off, returning it 86 yards for the final touchdown, sealing the win for Navy. For the midshipmen, Horvath threw for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also rushing 12 times for 211 yards and scoring 4 touchdowns. His counterpart, Hennigan, went 32 of 56 for 371 passing yards and 2 TDs, but also had that one critical interception at the end that was run back for a touchdown. Brandon Thomas rushed for 125 yards on 12 carries for Memphis, who now takes their 3-1 record to face Middle Tennessee, while Navy stays home to face UAB coming off their bye, as we mentioned earlier. Army, the other Service Academy member, also goes to 3-0, as Bryson Daly ran for 3 touchdowns and passed for 2 more in an impressive 37-14 victory over conference foe Rice at West Point's Michie Stadium. Daly accounted for 207 of Army's 272 yards in the first half as the Black Knights cruised to victory. E.J. Warner had 2 touchdown passes for Rice, but also had 2 interceptions. Rice, now 1-3, will return home to face Charlotte, while the undefeated Cadets will travel to Temple. Temple picked up its first win of the season, downing Utah State by a score of 45-29, leaving both squads with a record of 1-3. Evan Simon's 91-yard scoring pass to Dante Wright with 4 minutes left in the third quarter gave Temple the lead for good. Simon ended up throwing for 271 yards and 5 touchdowns and ran for 49 yards on 11 carries with 1 rushing touchdown. Kicker Maddox Trujillo also added to the excitement by hitting a 64-yard field goal, tying an NCAA record, which goes back to 2008. Temple will now try to take that momentum and put it to work against a very hot Army team next week. Charlotte took it on the chin this week against undefeated Indiana. The final score was 52-14. Trexler Ivy threw for 119 yards and a touchdown, but the 49ers were outgained 510 to 256 and also had 7 penalties for 51 yards. Charlotte will try to regroup as they take their 1-3 record to Houston next week to face Rice, 2 teams that will be desperately trying to get back on track. Florida Atlantic traveled to UConn and suffered a blistering 48-14 defeat. The Huskies jumped out to a 17-0 halftime lead and never looked back. Quarterback Cam Fancher threw for 87 yards with an interception. He was also the leading rusher for the Owls, picking up 71 yards on 8 carries. But FAU was outgained 542 to 250 and lost the possession battle by nearly 21 minutes. FAU, now 1-3, will next face Wagner. North Texas traveled to Wyoming and crushed the Cowboys 44-17, raising their record to 3-1. Chandler Morris had another great game, passing for 305 yards and two touchdowns, while Shane Porter ran the ball 13 times for 120 yards. Mackenzie McGill added 38 yards on 6 carries, but 3 of those carries were for touchdowns. North Texas now returns home to face Tulsa, who beat Louisiana Tech 23-20 in overtime. Seth Morgan was 3 for 3 on field goal attempts for the Golden Hurricanes, including a 45-yarder with just 27 seconds left to send the game into overtime, and then the game winner after the Tulsa defense recovered a fumble by the Bulldogs on their first overtime possession. Tulane evened its record at 2-2 with a 41-33 win over in-state rival Louisiana. Mekhi Hughes churned out 166 yards on the ground, adding a touchdown. Darian Mensah threw for 83 yards and a touchdown. Jack Chinchu scored on a 38-yard pick six with under 2 minutes to go in the first half, and then Rayshawn Pleasant ran back the second half kickoff 94 yards to extend the Green Wave lead. The game wasn't settled until the defense came up to intercept a Louisiana pass with under a minute remaining. Tulane will now host the University of South Florida. And how did the University of South Florida do? The South Florida football team battled number 8 Miami, Florida, close, and they held them close through a competitive first half before the Hurricanes pulled away, scoring 36 unanswered points after trailing 15-14 with 2 minutes to play in the first half for a 50-15 victory Saturday in front of 58,616 fans at Tampa's Raymond James Stadium. The Bulls were led by quarterback Byron Brown, who went 19 of 30 for 254 yards and ran for 27 yards and caught a touchdown pass from wide receiver Sean Atkins. Atkins logged his fourth career 100-plus yard performance, hauling in 11 passes for 125 yards, moving him into second place on the all-time USF list with 145 catches, and fifth on the all-time list in career receiving yards with 1,695. The last two teams we'll look at in Week 4 will be opponents against each other in Week 5, UTSA and East Carolina. The UTSA Roadrunners had a strong performance against Houston Christian and cruised to a 45-7 victory. Owen McCown threw 3 touchdown passes on 18 of 25 passing for 226 yards, while Brandon Hyde Jr. and Kavorian Barnes combined for 138 yards rushing and a touchdown apiece. UTSA has won 13 of its last 14 home games. Their Week 5 opponent, East Carolina, had to wait out a nearly 4-hour weather delay in Lynchburg, Virginia, against Liberty University. As if the weather wasn't bad enough, the outcome was even worse. Despite Jake Garcia's 20 for 36 passing night for 204 yards and a combined rushing attack of 127 yards, the Pirates had 2 critical turnovers, and Liberty was able to last well into the night and come away with the win. ECU falls to 2-2, while the Liberty Flames remain undefeated at 4-0. The final score of the game was Liberty 35, East Carolina 24. I was 8-3 on the week. I called the Navy upset of Memphis, but I missed on Rice for the second time as they went down against Army. I also incorrectly said that Tulane would come up short against Louisiana, but they managed to pull out the 8-point victory. And that North Texas, and I also said that North Texas would lose, but they won big. My record for Week 4 once again was 8-3, which brings my cumulative record after 4 weeks to 43-6. Pretty good so far. So what about Week 5? Army at 3-0 will defeat 1-3 Temple. Back in the summer, I called for Charlotte to come up with the win against a Rice team that has underperformed so far this season. I'll stick to my original forecast and go with the 49ers in this one. ECU will bounce back after a tough defeat and take down UTSA at home, an upset. FAU will pick up a much-needed win against Wagner before going on their bye week. Memphis will rebound with a win at home against Middle Tennessee to go to 4-1. North Texas will stay home, but with a win, excuse me, North Texas will stay put with a win over Tulsa. Tulane will outlast USF, and conference leader Navy will make it to 4-0 with a win over UAB. If you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with you next week to break down week 5 in the American Athletic Conference.